Hello, good morning, and welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain Osun.
Well, it's a beautiful Tuesday morning here in Lagos. I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily on Channels Television. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
And from Abuja, good morning. I'm Maope Ogun Yusuf.
Yeah. So I understand that lots of people are keeping tabs on what transpired yesterday, but it wasn't to be, was it?
Oh, what a day for our ladies. I must say up front that I am really proud. I am really proud. And I think for a lot of Nigerians, they're really proud of the Super Falcons, really. Imagine, one man down, as though that wasn't bad enough. Two women down. Take that back. Two women down. And, they still dragged the match up until the end of extra time. Goodness, I don't think I've ever seen that happen. I know that there are lots of talk about whether or not we were at our very best, but what I saw yesterday was a show of the Nigerian spirits, the fighting spirit, the determination, the resilience. I was almost comparing the female team with the male team and saying, you see your mates, I'm talking Super Eagles now, look at the Super Falcons, see how well they're pulling their weight. And I must commend the girls. Yes, they eventually lost to Morocco on penalties 5-4, but hey, they didn't get defeated. They just lost the match. That's not a defeat because, if anything, those women should be commended.
Wow. Well, yeah, much as that's the case, but these days you just wonder, what's going on with our football, really? Because, you're used to getting certain results and things going in a certain way. But these days, oh boy, well, the thing about that is that...
Nine-time African champions. I think we're good enough. We can allow this one slide, really.
Well, that's the thing. When you get there, the pressure is that you have to stay there.
And it gets harder to stay there.
But the thing is, perhaps we just need to introspect because other countries they're massively improving. They're doing things differently. They're studying how do we topple the Super Falcons? How do we topple Nigeria from that particular spot? So, well, I know that they say, look, you can't be at that particular spot forever. There are phases in football for different champions, different teams. Yes, that happens, but you know how it is. Nobody wants to leave that spot for them.
Can I just mention
any longer?
Honestly, can I just mention also that the fans at the pitch they didn't quite play fair because they were pointing lasers at our team.
Incidentally, North African team, you see that a lot.
They do that a lot, and I thought
football.
they would have changed. And this is women football, right? They're down to 9 women already. What more do you want? But they kept pointing the laser at the goalkeeper, at the players when it was time for penalty. And you know how lasers can distract you, right?
It's part of the psychological game.
It is not fair. It is wrong. And I think CAF FIFA should do something about this. It is wrong, really, I think.
Well, 9-time African champions, you said. Sometimes you lose the battle, but you didn't win. You didn't lose the war.
Yeah,
so, well, maybe we should just commend the Super Falcons for a job well done. If things were fairer, they would have won, I believe.
Yeah, I align with that. I second that motion.
How fair could you let it be?
They were pointing lasers.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one.
It doesn't violate the rules of the game, does it?
I think it does.
Well, who knows? But I guess they say better luck next time. Yeah. So we need to go back and then do a lot more. Yes, it's a new coach, but whatever happens to the new manager bounce? Teams have this new manager bounce. Where is our own new manager bounce, for goodness sakes? Maybe I'm just asking too much. But not that you're asking for things that they can't do or hasn't been done before. They can. They've done it before. All right. We'll go ahead and take you through some of the dailies this morning. Welcome back. Well, we've got Dr. Abimbola Oyarinu joining us this morning to take us through the dailies. He is of the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies, University of Lagos. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, sir. Thank you.
Let's start off with, ASU, leadership. They talk about that this morning, and a lot of papers also do. So, in 23 years, students lose cumulative 4 years to 16 ASU strikes. Who would have thought? And then you see public varsities woes continue over government's failure to honor agreements. Labour mobilizes for nationwide protest next week. And then they have this infographics of ASU strikes in over 2 decades. not a good situation.
At all. It's not. What I would say about the recurring strike of ASU is, I'm going to try to balance the argument. I would look at it from the perspective of federal government first. Do they have the funds to cater for the needs of ASU? I do not think so, because you understand that our income is dwindling. We no longer produce crude oil at the level at which we produce. Although crude oil prices is rising now, but then the population of Nigeria in terms of GDP per capita, when you look at it in relationship with what we make, you can tell that there's a problem. Then, when there's a problem, there's a need to look at the issue holistically and say, can we continue to fund university education the way we do? The truth is, we can no longer continue with business as usual. There's so many recommendations, and the best is we understand that Nigeria is a developing economy, and it will be wrong to monetize university education. It will only mean that only the rich would have access to it. But then when you ask yourself the question, do we, in a bid to educate every Nigerian, must we destroy the education itself? These are the tough questions that we must answer. We can no longer fund education the way we fund it. It is not feasible. If countries like the UK, for example, they've been able to make money off education, and we can also do the same. What we have is our educational standard has continued to drop every day. And the situation that happened to our primary and secondary schools is beginning to catch up with our universities, where the private universities are becoming a toast for Nigerians rather than going to public universities.
So you seem to say, what I get from what you're saying essentially is that you can't make education too expensive, yet you can't continue to subsidize education, essentially. So what is business unusual for you? Because you said you can't do business as usual. So what will be business unusual in terms of funding?
Simple. So the federal government pays the salaries of the staff of the university, and they mop up funds from the university. What it means is that University A, for example, does not have an incentive to invest in research, does not have an incentive to invest in marriage between town and gown. Why? Because whatever they make goes to the federal government, and the federal government will distribute to other universities that have done nothing. So what's the encouragement for productivity?
So they don't factor in the research needs of that institution and then in turn invest in those areas?
So this is what happens with the university funding. We distribute funds from the center to all universities based on recommendations for research. Then whatever we invest into research, you pull back into the federal government coffers and distribute. What it means is that there's no incentive for productivity. One of the reasons why capitalism is the toast of most nations in the world is because it encourages productivity. It encourages intelligence. It encourages people to do more. Because, when you look at the Harvard of this world, when you look at the Cambridge of this world, they invest so much in research because they can afford to generate income that will eventually add to the purse of the university. It's a plus for them. But in our own case, the plus goes to the federal government, and it is not distributed to universities that have done absolutely nothing.
So you'd rather the universities have control over the funds, or at least the money they make, in quotes?
We will get there eventually.
So you think that will be the solution to this funding?
Basically.
But,
the question of how do we then fund
the other ones who cannot make
students money? That cannot, that's an aside. Students that cannot afford to pay the fees that the universities will charge if they eventually get autonomy. It's simple. It is a popular notion that everyone must not go to the university. The university is not for everybody. I mean,
I don't think
That's a hard
everyone will agree with you on that.
no,
very much.
it's the truth. I went to, in my days in the university, you ask certain question that, what's this person doing in? I mean, it's just taking up space for people who actually do deserve to occupy this space. But because we have this perception that if you don't go to university, you're not a proper human being. There's a need for a ground-up restructuring, not just for the university now, but for the outside world. I tell you, we need to actually first marry the dichotomy between polytechnic graduates and university graduates, and also reward for labor. An average mechanic in Nigeria, his life chances, as it were, is that he's going to struggle till he dies. What creates that kind of structure?
All right, there are several other papers, as interesting as it is. But now, for ASU and the federal government, number one, ASU, should they be negotiating with the federal government differently? What should they do about it? Because they're asking, pay us what we earn already. Then if there has to be a different structure to the engagement or negotiations, probably so be it. How should they then approach it?
Well, for ASU, I'll blame them and I won't blame them. You cannot use the same approach all the time and expect a different result. But then again, on the other hand, the structure that we have on ground, this is about the only way they can engage the federal government. But I would say the ASU has often pursued the Marxist confrontational approach. Most people who end up in ASU leadership are usually, they have the Marxist orientation, which is understandable.
One track line.
Exactly. You know, I mean, what happens to lobbying? ASU is such a big pressure group that can influence who becomes what. And I tell you for free, I think they enjoy the system as it is, because most of the people who are even encouraging some of our politicians are from the academics.
All right, that's leadership today.
Well, lobbying, I wonder what that would then mean in this climb, but I'm not going to get into that. Oh, take a look at the Vanguard newspaper this morning. ASU is on the front page as well, so there's no running away from that one. You see, ASU, unions to shut banks, airports, others over strike. FG unions at each other's throats, and you see laments effects of prolonged strike on Nigeria's economy, students, others. I mean, leadership says 4 years, 4 academic years. Tasks, visits to ensure varsity fulfill primary roles and mandates. ASU sustained in strike with lies and blackmail or threats. As according to presidency officials, say FG has spent over 421.27 billion naira on varsities.
Oh, boy.
You know, the interesting thing about all of these statements is there's no solution right here.
All I lobbying here.
You know. Oh dear. So that's a page 5 read. I think we've talked about ASU, but there was a point you made, and it kept reminding me of the fact that Nigeria is still, as I say, a developing economy. So when you talk about mechanics and how much they earn, I know you're saying that now they should start earning premium. So I wonder how then that will trickle down. But again, let's not get into that. There's a big picture on the front page. Okobaba sawmill in Lagos gutted by fire. Now, this fire is said to be as a result of efforts to burn the sawdust from the plank market by the traders. So we keep seeing this fire incidents. But let's move on now. This one I'd like you to speak to. We have conducted a major investigation on individuals financing Boko Haram. That's coming from the federal government. It's a page 7 read. So I wonder, in the whole scheme of things, particularly the fight against terrorism, hearing this statement, how does it hit you?
Wow. The Nigerian former head of state, General Sani Abacha, said, if insurgency lasts more than 24 hours, it means that the government is involved. That speaks to what is happening with Boko Haram. It is not so hard to follow the money. And when you follow the money, you will definitely know what actually triggers or influence anything. Boko Haram crisis, if it does not have a connection with the who is who in power, I can assure you it wouldn't have escalated to the level that it is today, that it has become a monster that we have come to live with. The financiers of Boko Haram, interestingly, have conducted a research on the financing of Boko Haram in the past. And I can tell you that they go through the regular financial system. I mean, how difficult it is to...
But in the description, did they put money to be sent to Boko Haram? You know, how do you really...
I mean, these things are simple. The major funding for Boko Haram is through religious charities. I mean, how difficult it is it to track this? How difficult is it to, monitor the funding of this extremist group? I mean, if, I'm sorry to mention, if Nnamdi Kanu can be dug out of a hole in a foreign country, how difficult then is it to get those funding? I mean, trust me, they do get a lot of funds.
But in that research, did you find that the relevant authorities actually know that these funds are being channeled to fund terrorism?
You see, public servants won't act if they understand the body language of the who is who in power, because they only take orders from the top down.
No, I'm talking about, for instance, if the law says if somebody deposits perhaps 50 million, or there's a threshold, you have to notify the EFCC or the ICPC.
Exactly.
What body language you need to fulfill that part of the law?
Well, you do know that in this climb, the institutions are not strong. The individuals in office determine how the institutions function. And that is one of the bane of democracy in this part of the world. When we build institutions and our institutions become very strong, then we can now start to talk about public servants doing their job the way they should.
Oh, there you go with that one. And not forgetting the story in Zamfara about a bandit leader being turbaned and, government even represented in that particular...
I mean, an average police officer sees that and you think he will go after...
Well, guess what? There was a police officer in the
right
picture,
there,
just right
at
behind.
the turban.
And the police also said he's still a wanted man.
In Katsina State. So, well, there's Vanguard Sports, in case you're a sports lover like some of us, at least something to cheer you up. Well, not so much for the Falcons yesterday, but let's leave it there for the Vanguard newspaper.
Yeah, and from the Vanguard newspapers, let's take a look at the Guardian newspapers, which is a departure from ASU and terrorism and the likes. It takes a look at the economy. Stakeholders express cautious optimism as NNPC transits. Remember the launch was announced yesterday. Take a look at the riders. Explain how to tame $26.4 billion oil theft. OPEC report says Nigeria lost 703 billion naira worth of crude oil in 2002. Yeah, that's Q2 to second quarter 2002. Crude oil stolen by vandals, more than 65% of 2022 budget. Experts insist federal government on serious over ending oil theft. Now, that commands attention more than any other thing on the front page, particularly if you go down memory lane and recall how prior to the lockdown, Nigeria was still producing over 2 million barrels per day. Now the country cannot even meet the rising OPEC quota. So what's happening there? How are you weighing in on all of this?
We're in a very dire situation. What is happening with oil sector, which is more or less where we make all our money from? As you're aware, the NNPC is being privatized, and I think it's just a nomenclature change, because I don't think so much will change in terms of the way they operate, and that is the key to getting NNPC to work again. Regarding oil theft, I do think that the federal government, they know what to do. One time, Professor Yemi Oshibajo engaged the Niger Delta people, we saw some improvement. And I do think that negotiation is key to solving the problem of the Niger Delta. Because the federal government, they do not have any justification to go aggressively against the people of the Niger Delta, because I've been there. I can see physically what these people go through. And how can you justify telling them that oil theft is wrong? Because it looks like the Nigerian state itself is stealing from them. I mean, you impoverish a people with the wealth that is in their soil. I mean, it is more or less like a cost to them than a blessing.
Are you saying that the people are complicit in the crude oil theft ongoing in the Niger Delta when you suggest negotiation?
Everything is local, you know. So if you want to solve the crisis of oil theft, you go to the people in the grassroots. How do you start? Start to give licenses for the small refineries modular refineries that these people operate, and you will see that those people will themselves be the people who would protect the resources of the state. But when you don't involve the local people in the process, when they cannot make money from the wealth in their soil, I mean, it is a natural recourse to stealing. You have given room because humans...
So this clamp down on refineries ongoing in the Niger Delta is not helping the situation?
That's not the solution, if you ask me. They need to engage the local people and enrich them from what they tap from their soil, which is to give them the opportunity to thrive.
Well, let's engage the Federal Capital Territory people. Marwe.
Thank you, Kayode. Let's take a look at what Daily Trust has on its front page this morning. Boko Haram, others ambush soldiers, attack 4 states in 6 hours. That's the lead story. CJTF chair, 4 members killed in Borno. Troops foil attack in Niger. 2 killed, 1 injured in Plateau. 7-year-old killed, 19 others abducted in FCT Katsina. So quite a number of stories to internalize this morning, but this is it. Boko Haram, others ambush soldiers, attack 4 states in 6 hours. But let's focus on, I think, a story which we already saw earlier. Airlines bleed as Nigeria's oldest carrier, aero contractors, halt operations. NCAA deepens surveillance to avoid undercutting. So I know that we've already spoken a bit about the economy, but I'm sure that for people who are traveling by air right now, apart from the high cost of tickets, maybe they also have concerns of safety as to whether or not the regulator is really on top of its job. Do headlines like this reassure you when you see NCAA deepen surveillance to avoid undercutting?
Okay, so I did not really follow what you said, but from what I picked from it, I think I'll just respond to the crisis going on in the aviation sector. And what I would simply say is there's a need for intervention in the sector. What is happening in the sector is not peculiar to the Nigerian aviation sector alone. We do have a crisis globally with economies struggling as a result of the impact of COVID and all of that. And we do know that aviation fuel is now a problem. And airlines that were struggling prior to now might eventually need to pack up, and that's the case that's played out with aero contractors. But my argument will be that there's a need to intervene because the aviation sector is critical to the survival of any economy. And the government needs to engage the aviation sector. I would not advise that we go the way of subsidy, because that was how we started with the regular petroleum fuel that has become the bane of underdevelopment in Nigeria today. So I would say there's a need for reasonable engagement with the aviation sector to see how they can leverage on the opportunities available in the sector to ensure that they make enough money to keep afloat.
All right, then. I guess that's a Magwa, is it? Okay, so look at Nigerian Tribune. FG in frantic move to end ASU strike, holds meeting with vice chancellors. Others, aviation union threatens to shut down airports. So that also features right there. And then this piece, Ghana confirms first cases of deadly Marburg virus. FG to deploy COVID-19 strategy to address Lassa fever, ascribed to the health minister. So we did not tell him. Ghana, not too far from here. So if this deadly Marburg virus is there and we are deploying COVID-19 strategy, do you see this as perhaps foolproof?
Well, we are just getting to understand the new virus, and I'm sure as we gain knowledge on it, we will be able to tackle it. But I do know that we have been lucky in the past. It's not like we have done anything exceptional to tackle some of this.
Sorry to jump in. What's happening to our research institutions? How are they faring?
Well, Nigeria has happened to everything.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Nigeria has happened to us, it has happened to everything, and there's a need to understand the place of structure in the functioning of a society. The dilapidated structure at the center has affected everything around it. So I would lean to the functionalist argument that for a society to function effectively, all the substructures must work in harmony with the core to achieve progress.
And so if the center, as you say, disorganized, those structures cannot give it some sort of form, can they?
What is a man without his head? Nothing.
So does that justify that we deserve the kind of leaders we get?
Of course. 2023 is an indication that we'll be here for a long time.
What do you think people should focus on as we wind down on the elections in choosing who you think the right person should be? What should be, perhaps, if there's any one key consideration?
The key consideration is single. We do not make as much money as we used to make. So look at the candidate that is most prudent with funds.
All right. Abimbola Oyarinu, PhD, is of the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies, University of Lagos. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, back in a moment. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. So, to review our electoral process, compliance of political parties with the provisions of the Electoral Act, and then the role of the courts in the scheme of things. We're joined, as you may have seen in that welcoming slide, by Mr. Mike Igini, who is the resident electoral commissioner for Akwa Ibom State. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you, Shambali and Kayode, my very good sister, for having me.
So the elections have come and gone. I know that INEC usually they do their internal analysis. They have what they want to achieve, how they expect the elections to turn out. So from what you saw on ground so far, of course, compared to the previous elections, how do you think the processes, the planning played out on the day?
Thank you very much. Our people, institution must have something to build on. Nigerians will agree that even though we are not where we want to be, to INEC be one of the best election management body that will be conducting most credible and free, fair election in our country. But what is incontestable is the fact that the kind of elections that we have witnessed since 2011, from the Jagad period up to this moment of the current leadership of Professor Mamu Yakubu, they are elections in a different class, different from what we used to have before. And what Ekiti, Edo, Anambra, Ondo, and the very recent one, Osun elections have shown, it is to the fact that whenever there's a harmony of interests as to the direction we want to go, it will reduce opportunistic behavior. And that shows clearly that no matter the challenges we are going through, the ill of democracy can only be cured by more democracy. In terms of the improvement that you have seen,
can never be a disharmony
on a incremental basis.
Mr. Mike, can never be a disharmony of interests.
Yes, of course. Because...
Sorry, you said when there's a harmony
when there's a harmony of interest, when there's a shared value.
Because people will definitely want to do what they want to do.
There must be. You see, that is at the heart of our disarray. Lack of shared vision. What is the role of law in our party democracy in terms of compliance? And so when we talk about harmony of interest, we must agree that there must be some benchmarks, some basic thresholds that must not be overlooked. Because around the world, there are 3 basic metrics in measuring good elections. Was there participation? Was there competition? Was there a legitimate outcome? Because in a democracy, effective power to lead must lie in due election where people are fully elected. And so, the point being made here is that, the job of an umpire is like that of a football coach. And that's why I don't want to be a coach. Because the victory of yesterday doesn't matter. It is today's match. If you don't win this match today, you're in trouble. So you could say that, but for human agency, issue about sabotage, negligence, and all of that, nobody's talking about beavers now.
So what were
because the beavers that people talked about
who were the
is
actors,
working perfectly.
Who were the actors or factors that reduced opportunistic behavior in the Osun election, or maybe Ekiti as well, in recent times?
Clearly, generally speaking. You see, INEC is the most innovative and most improved public service delivery institution in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. All right?
According to who?
According to
you.
The evidence, which is empirical, around. I say this because if you look at what the commission has been doing from one election to other, there has been massive improvement in terms of processes, procedures, to deal with historical challenges of election service delivery in our country. But regrettably and tragically, there have not been a complementary change of behavior on the part of the political class. They prefer chaos to order. They thrive more in chaos. But in a strong society where the rule of law remains the graceful ornament to an ordered society, very many of the people that you find around should be cooling themselves somewhere in prison, not to be found in public space. Now, if you look at what has happened in Osun and all the states I've mentioned, no normal quarrel about beavers, you could see that the 2022 Electoral Act, and I must thank all Nigerians, I must thank the National Assembly, that despite the back and forth, the delays, that what this National Assembly has done in respect of the 2022 Electoral Act, and what we are beginning to see happen, will be written down in history, and so shall they be remembered. And that is why it is important here, for those who don't know this. People say, oh, why is he speaking on certain matters? Look, knowledge will forever govern ignorance. Part 1, Section 2 of the 2022 Electoral Act has enjoined the commission, the 36 state commissioners, the electoral officers, staff, or all those who work in INEC, not only to provide civic and voters education under Section 1, Part 2, but also to educate Nigerians on sound knowledge of democracy and democratic processes.
One,
And that is why I've advised that people should go and read this 2022 Electoral Act.
we'll look at some of those provisions soon. But
Very well.
before we move on from the conduct of the last elections, of which you say INEC did,
Exceedingly well.
That's what you say. But do we expect INEC? Because when we raised the issue of voided votes yesterday, that's a huge figure compared to the previous ones. And so does INEC normally sit back and say, wait a minute, how do we have this amount of voided votes as opposed to just assuming what everybody else thinks that, well, people just printed wrongly? Do you forensically look at those ballot papers? How do we know that, wait a minute, can't one official be deliberately voiding some of these votes to countermand people's chances or the opponent's chances or something like that? Look at the fingerprints or thumbprints and be sure that it's not the same. Does that ever happen?
Chamberlain, this goes to the issue about voters' education. And voters' education...
No, I'm talking about
I know. I am going to that point.
Okay.
Voters' education is a multi-stakeholder responsibility. The incident of void votes. What is a void vote? A void vote is a vote where on the ballot, a voter who perhaps do not understand the boxes with respect to each of the logo. You don't have name of candidate in the ballot. What you have is a logo. To what extent do the general public, voters, know the logo of the various political parties? Now, I would have brought a specimen of that here. But the point is that when you are doing a thumbprint and it crosses two parties, A and B, that constitutes a void vote. And most of the void vote we are having is a situation where when they are thumbprinting, they put their thumb crossing two logo of a political party. So the choice is not clear. That is one preeminent one that we have found.
That's one
and
part
that
of
does
it.
not need to require a complex forensic exercise. Because by looking at the ballot in the presence of the party agents, all right, you could say this is a void vote where the choice cannot be.
What I'm
determined.
asking is, because you say that politicians or some of them thrive in chaos. Now, what stops, perhaps if I were an INEC official, or and then assuming that someone tried to compromise me from one of those parties, and then while I'm trying to sort the votes or sort the ballots, I have ink on my thumb. So while I'm doing some of those things, I can just thumbprint either in the guise of mistakenly some of those ballots. And then it doesn't have just more than one thumbprint. It has it has two.
Unfortunately, what you are talking about is a conjecture. It's an assumption. You do not be
But
right
people
to be
say
asking.
they've seen ballots with
No,
two
that is not
thumbprints.
correct. Listen, every election, you have party agents. Once you have been accredited and issued ballot paper, you go to the cubicle, which is secret. Now, the way and manner it will be folded, you will have been taught the way it should be folded. Sometimes folding, that reminds me, could also lead to that. Wrong folding of the ballot paper, in a certain manner, could now cross over to another party.
And then you have two thumbprints.
So we have two, right?
So how do you fold correctly?
Now, you are
you
taught.
Enclose?
You are taught how to fold it because there's a line. Okay? It will not cross over. And that is why it is folded. It is folded before it's given to the voter. So that once you go there, make your choice, you just use that format and put it on the box. So that really is not a major problem. But I think the fundamental issue, the reality of today, is the menace. What used to be a menace of vote buying that have assumed the level, the dimension of epidemic. That is the greatest thing that we need to deal with. As well as the issue you talked about. the increasing involvement of the courts in politics, what Jonathan Sumption, the retired Supreme Court Justice, called the expanding empire of the courts, which shows a clear indication of the failure of politics and the assumption that law can fill the void. And what is the implication of that to our judiciary? Those are the clear issues. So the first one, about vote buying. Vote buying constitutes a devaluation of the ballot as the best means of expression of the will of the people in a democracy. I know democracy in its traditional classical sense, as we all know, is a very fragile construct, extremely vulnerable. That is why it has to be protected. Now, vote buying has become a problem, and it has huge implications if we don't stop it now. First, the first implication of vote buying is that it's going to remove what we call performance politics, because the opportunity, the benefit of an incumbent, for instance, is that once you have performed, in the next election, you should be rewarded on account of your performance. But because of vote buying, if not dealt with right away, and I'm going to make some suggestions today, calling on the National Assembly. Thank God we still have about 7 months to go. And we're going to make some suggestions here today. Now, if you don't stop that, there will be no performance anymore.
Who's
all
we,
that people
by the
need to
way?
do. What?
Who is we? If you said if we don't stop that, who is
The
we?
law. The law enforcement agencies. And we're going to go
What
into
about
that.
INEC?
First and foremost, INEC has it by way of administration. But I think, let me just close on the effect first. First, there will be no performance anymore, because all you need to do is to keep money as much as possible. If the time comes, since somebody who's going to come in to challenge you is going to buy a vote, don't do any work anymore. Just keep money there. In fact, it will be cheaper for you to do that. 2, vote buying non-stop reinforces inequality in society, because it will be a case of only the rich and the wealthy.
But
Number 3, I just want to list all the areas of vote buying. 3, it will lead to what we call class bias policies. Class bias policies. Number 4, there's what we call the equality of vote of all citizens. But when there is vote buying, it means that you are going to flood inequality into the quality of public franchise. These are critical,
Mr. Guinea,
that electoral historians have identified as responsible for the political economy of vote buying. Yeah.
Beyond the rhetorics, what's the goal of all the arrests that have been made so far, i.e. in the Ekiti election and in the Osun election? If we continue to make arrests and it doesn't make significant impact on the naming of political parties that are involved and impact on the outcome of the results itself, then you're going to come back here next year and continue talking about the ills of vote buying.
Thank you. And that is why we're very clear that, look, why are we always lamenting in our country? Is the book of lamentation written in the Bible because of Nigeria? Absolutely no. We have to deal with the issue, because we cannot be in autarky of best practice around the world. Nigeria is not the first country that we have recorded incident of vote buying. In fact, some of the notorious countries that you see today, United Kingdom, United States of America, the former Soviet Union, Costa Rica, Latin American countries, they were all involved in that. But what happened? In 1856, the Australians gave to humanity the idea of secret balloting to deal with the issue about vote buying. There was resistance in England that only embraced it in 1872. And of course, America, which is very, very notorious, only embraced it in 1892. Now, the point here is that what did they do in England? Which is my prescription to National Assembly. As I commend you people, that even though you're also a victim of the current 2022 Electoral Act, because you didn't listen to some of the technical advice we gave here a year ago in June, right here.
A victim, the champion.
No. When I say a victim in the sense that some of them, if they listen to the statistics that we provided here since 2003, of the rate of attrition, and that direct primary is the best way to go, they will not be where we are today. But what did they do in England? In England, when it became a problem, for example, in 1832, in the borough of Stanford, alone, £5,000 was used to purchase 850 votes out of 1,000 register. What did they do? 1872, they came up with the Ballot Act. And so the first prescription, which I'm asking National Assembly to do this, before the 2023 election, so that you will continue to be remembered for having this profound Electoral Act that we're having today. Number one, is that in England, to deal with it, was that if you are caught buying votes through your party campaigner or influencer or campaign manager, and it's traceable to you, first, you are banned from participating in that election, as well as your political party, you are banned from participating in that election.
The political party?
Yes, you are banned from, you see, because political parties, you feed that candidate.
Whoa.
You are expected to hold, you are expected to be responsible for that. So, but first, the first stage, they were in two stages.
Yeah.
They dealt with the individual first.
So
you are banned. So I'm recommending here that...
So the current provisions don't provide for this stern punishment?
No, I will come to that. But to give the historical background, so that when I said we are not in autarky, we are not in isolation, we must learn. Because every civilization has the primitive past. But Nigeria don't need to go through that whole horde again. So what happened? You were banned for 6 years in England. Then if you repeat that again, you could be banned for life. So Nigeria here... That's the individual. Individual will be banned for life. All right? You'll be banned for life. Then if a political party, you are also, first and foremost, it meant that you must feed responsible people to be on your platform. You could also be punished from feeding candidate in that particular election. But subsequently, you could feel that. So in Nigeria, we need to do that. Now,
so what are the current provisions? And
correct.
Where will
these arrests lead us? The entire section 114 to 129 under Part 7 of the 2022 Electoral Act, it clearly identifies acts, conduct that are considered as an anathema, that are totally prohibited. Particularly, Section 121 of the 2022 Electoral Act prohibit the act of buying, selling of vote. This is because, what is a vote? A vote is a public good. A vote is a citizen share of public franchise. It must not be sold. It must not be bought. In fact, even when there's no law, citizens should be punished for their moral failing, because selling a vote constitutes a betrayal of the principle of democracy.
There are a number of things that might make that difficult to apply.
Yes.
Because number one is that the courts, of course, they have a huge role to play here.
Yes.
If you catch someone on the day said to be buying votes, number one is that it's got to be caught, arrested, charged to court, court has to prove that, yes, that was indeed vote buying before the sanction is applied, isn't it?
Look, Chamberlain.
No, is that what you're...
Correct.
Okay.
And I give you an example, a practical example. In 2013, we have traveled to many parts of the world on election matter. In 2013 in Kenya, we were there for the 5th of March election. On that day, we were monitoring. The campaign manager of a senatorial candidate was caught with different envelopes containing monies that he was using to induce by voters.
Campaign manager?
Yes. He was arrested. That same day. He was charged to court that same day in Kenya. The second day, he was convicted to 3 years imprisonment. And that election was for a period of 5 days. We were in Kenya.
That was a quick one. The second day.
So the point you raised here is very significant. Why is it that people who have been arrested over time on this matter, we do nothing about those people? Because the only way you can make that impact is to quickly arraign them, because the evidence is already there. In the United States of America, over 400 cases before the 2020 election. They were all determined before the takeoff
There
of
are
that
things we need
election.
to look at.
Why
resigned
are we
that
different here?
So
Why are we different here?
So are you resigned to the fact that this current arrests are leading nowhere?
We are calling on them. It's not that they are leading nowhere. We are saying this is what you need to do right now.
Mr.
To
Gine,
send a clear message to would-be persons.
There are certain provisions we need to look at
unacceptable.
before we run out of time.
Yeah.
I was trying to make a point where you say, look, in Kenya, that's a campaign manager. But what we've seen here in the field is you can't see a campaign manager with that. They're smarter than that. Thugs, are the ones that carry out some of these things. And if a political party could sponsor a thug, and who goes and claims that he belongs to the other political party, so it then becomes difficult to prove that he is a member of that political party.
The problem's not about
So,
proof.
in that particular scenario, how do you do that? And can you actually put it in the laws here that you ban a political party? For instance, if it happens to be a ruling party, given all the influence they wield across board, how can that political party realistically be banned in this our climb here?
Where is the place of the rule of law in our democracy? Where you begin to talk about a ruling party. In 2015, when I was in Edo State, some members of the party said, PDP, that they were going to talk about federal might. I said, where? Edo State here. There will be no federal might, but the might of the people through the ballot that will determine what happens here. You see, I agree with you. The arrogance of I belong to either the ruling party at the state or at the federal is at the heart of the state of anomaly we find ourselves today. That when we advise people here that call lawyers, engage lawyers, they don't understand. Today, look at the issue about primaries and all that. How many of them recognize the fact that we are preventing them, rather than being candidate for election, they may end up being candidate for the prison? Why? Because look at section, I just told you, all the sections dealing with offenses. We are offenses relating to section 114, registration, nomination. Under nomination, section 115, subsection D of the 2022 Electoral Act stipulates that no person shall obtain more than one form as a candidate for different election. And the offense for that, under subsection K, beyond the financial, you will go for 2 years imprisonment. So our advocacy, advising people, don't do this, is to prevent people from being candidate of prison rather than candidate for election.
This is concerning primaries,
primaries, right now.
So Mr. Egini.
So some people are claiming that they participated in the one election, at the same time, they fill 2 forms. Look at what the law is saying there. Ignorance of the law. It's not an excuse. 2 years imprisonment under subsection K. We are preventing them from being candidates of prison, and they are calling our names everywhere.
So clearly there are candidates that come to mind right now that may have fallen foul of this.
Very many of them. Very many of them. Very many of them.
So who's meant to take this up?
That filled one form for a political party and then...
You see, that's one of the issues.
Enter for another political party.
Now, INEC, what INEC can do is what we are doing now. Point your attention to that. But you look at some of the provisions in the Electoral Act. They don't tell you who should take it up.
Okay, so we'll go to break.
They don't even tell you.
So can INEC be the person to take them to court, or the political party? So if INEC were to take them to court, can they be described as having descended into the arena, or what? What is the way out? We'll talk about that when we come back and more. Don't go away. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, we've talked about Section 115 of the Electoral Act 2022, where it talks about offences that persons may commit, which may run foul of for the party primaries. But the 115K, which Mr. Guinea referred to before we went to break, it says, signs, I'm quoting that now, signs a nomination paper consenting to be a candidate at an election, just a minute, commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a maximum term of imprisonment for 2 years. Now, this is what the Electoral Act 2022, Section 115, Sub K, says, concerning party primaries. But the thing about all of this now, because I also have people who are writing and asking questions about different things, but looking through this section, you expect that, I mean, lawyers, candidates should know some of these things. But does this same clause, for instance, include an aspirant who lost or withdrew from a particular election and then switch over to another election for the purposes of nominations? Because they say, look, does this same clause imply concurrent holding of different nomination forms?
What is clear there is this. You know, there's a time for the sales of nomination forms. It will have closed. Now, what is even expected with respect to those under Section 31 who have withdrawn, all right, is for those who bought the form before to now be the one to participate in a new primary under Section 84, subsection 1, because the sales of forms had long closed. But I've watched on your television here people walking into their way to prison when they say that they bought 2 forms. Section 115, subsection D, prohibit that. In fact, subsection 3 of 115 says that even the attempt itself will be treated as the offense. Go and read it. It's there.
But it says in more than one constituency. So someone ran for president, and now the person is saying, I want to run for Senate.
In a different...
No. Read it. It is disjunctive. It said, read it for Nigerians to read.
Yeah. So the D says, signs a nomination paper or result form as a candidate in more than one constituency at the same election.
Look at the word it's disjunctive. If you sign more than one form, because a state assembly election is a constituency. House of Reps is a constituency. Senatorial is a constituency. Governorship is a constituency. Presidential is one constituency. So if you bought a form and you bought 2 forms for 2 different constituencies at the same time as a candidate, disjunctive,
so are you saying
and all of that.
Those who fail to make it with their presidential aspiration
Yes.
are now resorting to Senate have run foul of this law?
No, if they claim that they bought the form, as we are hearing, reading the paper, they have run foul of the law already.
Or is there any other way to run for office without buying form?
I just told you that there's a period for the sales of forms.
So clearly they must have bought the form.
So that means they have bought the forms at the same time.
That is it. You see, this whole noise, let me say this.
They also accuse you, before you just respond to it, they accuse you saying, look, INEC cannot, for instance, the law says it is the political parties that submit the names of their candidates.
Correct.
So they say that, how is it that we submit the names of our candidate, who we think is our person, and INEC says, no, you cannot do this kind of thing. So they feel that INEC is descending into the arena. We will be the ones to submit. If anybody is aggrieved about it, go challenge us in court.
Thank you very much. Democracy must be based on the rule of law. If you want to ridicule, we are basically ridiculing our society. Section 84 says you must go for primaries. And that shall be monitored by INEC. The other section 29, that you now have to submit, which they are right, in submitting must be people who emerge from valid primaries. Now, when you are uploading to INEC, you are supposed to bring the particulars of those who went through that process. If you fail to do so, INEC can remind you, we are written to them, that look, the names that you sent are not the ones that are contained now, are monitored, and of course, you've seen INEC have issued, statement to that effect. Look, let me tell you this. If you do not want noise making during the preparation of your pounded yam, don't buy the yam on credit. Those who crave the honor of a king, of a public office, must not break the law of the land. And for those who think that going to be saying all this you are saying and all that, look, that we should keep quiet, we will not keep quiet. Because in a congregation where everybody is possessed by the Holy Spirit, who will shout hallelujah? We must do the right thing. And that is the beauty of what we are saying today. Look at Osun, look at all the... Are you saying that people are going to tribunal? We are going to end the business of tribunal in this country. So, National Assembly, a new law. This is what you are going to be remembered for. A candidate who is found in the 2023 election, because once nomination paper had been filed, once a date had been fixed for election, you cannot sell, give, gift, money, anything of any kind through that period. A new law. You will be banned for 5 years or 6 years, as the case may be. And when that again repeated, you'll be banned for life. It is because of the question of what you talk about, the theory about pressure and pain. People don't put their hands on fire. It's because of pain.
Okay, let's bring him up, but she's got some questions.
That is why we must stand tall and mighty in defense of democracy and the rule of law.
Magba?
Very interesting proverbs that Mr. Igini is sharing this morning. I don't know whether he's coined them originally, because I haven't heard that. I mean, like, if everyone is possessed by the Holy Spirit, who's left to shout hallelujah? So are you saying in this case that INEC has a duty, so to speak, to shout hallelujah, to be the one to point out if there is been any misdemeanor? If you say yes, the question is, what then is the place of withdrawal? I mean, the Electoral Act does also make provisions for withdrawal of candidates and replacing them, giving that power to, or that leeway to political parties. How is that supposed to happen?
Thank you, Mark. INEC is a regulator, the chief regulator of election in the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to the exclusion of any other agency. Every other person can support us. Number two, Section 31 is statutory, and that of a case of death. In fact, may I just tell you this? Do you know that very many candidates who emerged from primary, they are in hiding now because of sudden death. I was called that somebody ran out to the country right now. Many of the candidates are hiding now because of sudden death. Because somebody called me and said, Guinea, we learned that in Nigeria that once you die, I know that you refer to one law about death. I said, no. They always say that in the case of death, we cannot change. Now, Section 31 you refer to, it is not automatic. When we don't have the time to go to the history of how we now got to Section 31 right now. But here is the point here. Section 31 says that if a person who has emerged intends to withdraw, he must do so in writing, signed by himself, delivered by himself in person to his party, then sent to INEC. That is statutory. That doesn't mean that automatically the party will not just pick anybody. You still have to go back to Section 84, subsection 1. That's what most political parties are doing. But Mark, do you know what is going on now? Fortunately, I'm not in New York right now. I would have given you letters sent from by political parties to the commission in my office, stating that they intend to drop candidate, but that their letter will be submitted to us in due course. That's what they are saying. It shows that they don't want to respect the law. As a regulator, we will do what we need to do. At best, you should be the one going to court. Because in Nigeria today, those who are doing the wrong thing are the ones challenging people to go to court. This is wrong. And that's why I call on my colleagues in the bench that, look, our profession, the rule of law that trips the tongue of every lawyer and non-educated lawyer, doesn't mean that every human problem or moral dilemma calls for legal solution. Okay. But as lawyers, we must stand tall and be a protector of the rule of law. How can we have a country where those who do the wrong thing are the ones first telling people that you can go to court? Look, they have done so much damage to the system. We are not ready to accept that. Okay. And that's why I'm of the view that even whenever the ceremony of a man is over, and you see the drummer man hanging around loosely, despite our grief, which will ask if you want to marry the widow, they have done too much damage, and we are asking them to allow the system to work.
So let me ask you to clarify for us. I mean, apart from Akwa Ibom, which you have, I mean, which is right in the public space, and you have been very categorical about, and the commission has also been very categorical about that. Have there been other examples which you have seen? Because placeholder was one of the controversial provisions which a number of political parties have tried to exploit, and people have said that, oh, INEC says there is no place for placeholders in our laws. Do you think that political parties are in risk of losing their tickets as a result of how they've gone about it?
There are no risk, because under the Constitution and the Electoral Act, the various presidential candidates, or maybe governorship and all that, they have done what the law required them to do. They never wrote a letter to INEC that they were putting people there as placeholder. No such letter. Because, as rightly stated by the Commission through our National Commissioner, Professor Sokoye, and other lawyers, there is no provision in the Electoral Act on the Constitution with respect to placeholder. However, because I said that we are not in autarky of what is happening around us, in the United States of America, there's a practice by governors in various states wherein, in the case of death of a legislator, a placeholder can be appointed by a governor. That is why, for the time being, and that's why a placeholder is defined as somebody appointed to a position temporarily with the understanding that he will not, as of right, contest for that position. So with respect to the presidential candidate in Nigeria, they have done what is right under Section 141. And in any case, if anybody is in doubt, go to Chapter 123, Section 11 of the Interpretation Act, which says clearly that inherent in the power to appoint is inherent to also
We're winding
withdraw.
down now. So just some quick sections in the law, which
Yes.
Could you clarify? What is the difference between an aspirant and a candidate with respect to Section 84, which is cited?
Yes, an aspirant is someone who has bought form to participate in the primary process. It is when you have emerged that you become a candidate that can now come under Section 29 to be submitted to the Independent National Electoral Commission. But again, more important, which is why I continue to commend the National Assembly, and the proposal we are putting forward right now should be taken very seriously in terms of banning people for life and banning them for a period, politicians who are involved in vote buying and all that, is the fact that what they have done with Section 51, we'll be having inconclusive election. You are not going to see inconclusive election
Who
again.
determines if a primary is valid?
Who determines whether who is primary is valid?
The
validity of a primary is determined by the law. Section 84, subsection 1 of the Electoral Act.
Who carries out that
2022.
law? Who's meant to ensure that that law is maybe followed or at least adhered to?
Fine, that is the beauty of INEC coming in here.
So
and
eventually
that's why the law
INEC
says
decides if a primary is done right or wrong.
No, the point is this. We monitor the process. Because first, primary is an activity of political party. The idea is to bring sanity. Issue about idea of internal party democracy. So when we monitor the process, they press the ballot paper and everything. Ours is to write the report of what we say. And they're going to be what they call joint report, so joint result.
So INEC doesn't have a right to say this primary was not conducted well?
No, Section 84, subsection 13 is very clear that INEC had power to reject when you have not complied with Section 29, subsection 1. However, this has been an issue. Why are you not exercising that power? There are two schools of thought. I belong to the first school of thought. The idea that allow political parties to do whatever they want to do. Well, that does not micromanage them. Okay. Let them do whatever they bring. However, it is now be established. And look, because democracy is a fragile construct, extremely vulnerable to the extreme idea of my own idea, preferable, it should be monitored and should be protected. So that is why we now come in. Okay. Because as you have seen, Mark talked about Akwa Ibom. If you look at what is happening in Akwa Ibom, you saw the report all over yesterday that the Nigerian police have confirmed the forgery that took place. So we are in a country where people are no longer afraid of the court. People can even forge documents and go to the court of law.
Just respond to this one briefly.
On my colleagues in the bench.
If you can respond to this,
must stand tall, as brief as you can, and the rule of law.
As brief as you can. Now, the Electoral Act requires political parties to notify INEC of their intent to conduct primary elections at least 21 days before the date of their convention. It also requires parties to submit their membership register.
Section 77.
That's at least 30 days before primary election.
Correct.
Now, they say the APC didn't meet the first requirement and the PDP failed the second requirement. The Labour Party met both, and they are saying, well, documents at INEC Insider shared indicates that APC didn't notify INEC of its intent to conduct its primary election 21 days before that time. Section 82 of the Electoral Act says the penalty of this infraction is outright disqualification of the candidates of political parties. Section 82(1) of the Electoral Act 2022 says every political party shall give the commission at least 21 days notice. Now, assuming these scenarios were the case, will both political parties be disqualified?
You know, as an umpire, you don't respond to question of assumption. In fact, that's why I would have preferred to see some of the things that have been said here. I have not had the opportunity of seeing them. But what is expected is that the Constitution, the 2022 Electoral Act, must be adhered to so that we can have a society that we're proud of. But today, because the rule of law is preferable to the rule of individuals, no matter how magnanimous, that is the only way we can give meaning and purpose to the ballot as the best means of expression of the will of the people so that we can build a society where there will be opportunity for all and responsibility from all.
Mr. Mike Igini is a resident electoral commissioner for Akwa Ibom State. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
We will be back in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. Well, yes, we're turning our attention to economic matters. As you've seen, those two gentlemen, they join us here in our studios in Lagos. Professor Ken Ife is an economist, and Mr. Paul Alaje is a senior economist at SPM Professionals. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Well, economy. What can we do without it? Now, the NBS have released their own stats. Inflation as of June, 18.60%. But basic economics now. How do we explain to people who, on a regular basis, go to the market to see that the prices almost on a consistent basis are over the roof? We're not earning as a country as much as we used to. And then if you look at our fiscal deficit, also raising huge concerns. What economic principles explain that for us?
It's very tough, I have to tell you, because everything that can go wrong has actually gone wrong. And there is a degree of cost-push inflation, a degree, which is what kind of input costs to produce and to manufacturing activities that are pushing and fueling this inflation. There's a substantial degree of imported inflation, substantial, because we are still, it's very, very substantial and very strong for two reasons. One is that we have an import-dependent economy, and we've been fighting it. We fought cement and got out of it. We fought rice with CBN intervention and got it under control, but we still have more battle lines. And the reason is because Nigeria is on the transmission belt of global supply chain. That's why, although there is energy crisis in Russia and all that is stimulated, the grain you can understand, wheat, we are buying bread, so you can see how that affects us directly. But the oil, what's it? Where are you producing country? We are gas producing country, so why would gas oil thing going on there affect us? But all the people we are importing from Europe and all that, they are all subject to high rise because their gas supplies are cutting that. So our position in the supply chain means that we are to every crisis, wherever they come globally, because we are on that transmission belt, we get affected.
Mr. Alaji, how do you see it?
Well, for me, it's a lot of concern. When you have food inflation about 20% per annum, it's a lot of issues. It also tells us that our people, what they earn, when you compare, if they are just to spend all their money on foods, if what the food could buy is 5 cups of rice, this year, one has disappeared. It's not that one of the persons who will feed on the remaining cup of rice has died. It simply means that you are working, you are hustling, earning the same amount, but the capacity of the money, earning ability of the money has reduced by 20% if you are to spend all your money on foods. But if you look at the number released by National Bureau of Statistics, 18%. It does not mean that what we had last month was better off at 17.7%. Things are getting worse. Things are getting worse than the way they are. And when you look at all of this, compare that with what what unemployment said. According to the last figure released by the same organization, the National Bureau of Statistics, at over 33%, about 33.1%. Combine that with children that are in school, combine that with infrastructure level, combine that with the fact that more than 3 times, power transmission company has announced that the facility that transmit power from the point of generation to distribution have collapsed in Nigeria. Combine that with hunger and poverty. Combine that with over 86 million Nigerians that are living below poverty line. Combine that again with quite a number of factors. You know that you need to have thick skin to remain in Nigeria today.
You know, I mean, we can talk about these challenges, and that's essentially why we have government or people in power. And this is a part I'd like you to explain. You've tried to break it down: cost push inflation, imported inflation. By the way, if you were to give a percentage of a total, how much would you say of the current inflation is cost push? How much would you say is imported?
I haven't even finished saying this. There is demand pull inflation.
Oh dear.
Because we are 200 million people, you think, but we're actually feeding 300 million people.
From
when
where?
you put the 100 million surrounding us, Francophone countries, Niger, Mali, Benin, Northern Cameroon, which are Burkina Faso, then Chad. We're feeding all these because of their agroecology. They're having issues. And then what is critical is that our 1 naira were buying 3 francs CFA 5 years, 6 years ago. Now 1 naira cannot buy 1 franc CFA, it's 0.8. What that means is that to them, you are Nigeria, I'm in the frontier state. Our currency is cheap, our food is cheap, cheaper by 70%. So why do they need to go and kill themselves? Farming what? In dry draft? No. They'll buy your food, and then they process, and whatever they do, they can sell it back to you or they can export it. But you are so cheap. So, and then let me tell you the competitive position. It is cheaper for them to double their price. If we do something about price, they can double their price at the Kanu, at Sokoto, all that front line. But you can't in Nigeria, because to move 1 ton of any grain from those frontier states down to the south, to Lagos here, 100,000 naira per ton. So you can't compete. I mean, if you increase the price of transportation by 50%, you still can't compete with them because you are 70% cheaper than them.
And it looks like...
So it's a very, very tough situation. And I'll tell you another thing. World Food Program is buying food because they have to feed 20 million people. So you're not the only one. They're not the only one buying our food. And then you also think about how much support are we giving to the farmers that are actually growing the food? Then, sorry, I forgot. Security means insecurity in the 6 geopolitical zone means that the actual agroecological food, not footprint is shrinking. Because people are abandoning their farms and coming back south. They're abandoning them. And then, so the big farmers we have in the north with thousands of hectares have abandoned them because they were occupied by bandits.
Well, pardon me. So essentially, you've tried to break it down, and I think you're saying that there are diverse reasons responsible for what we're seeing now. And I'd still like to drive the conversation, because I know a lot of times the conversation stops at the bulk of the table of government anyway, the CBN. And I recall during one of the MPC decisions, the CBN had said that, you know what, they want to actually strengthen the perception that... They don't want to strengthen, rather, the perception that the CBN has abandoned its primary mandate of taming inflation. And I'm sure you recall that statement made by the CBN governor. So essentially reinforcing that fact that we're meant to be at the driver's seat. And I mean, all of these things are not lost on government, really. The fact that we're feeding 300 million people, the fact that there's so many issues contending. So again, I ask, in terms of taming that inflation, would you say we have done enough?
We are trying. But
is that enough?
We could do more. We could do more. Because you are not comparing like to like. Monetary policy could have helped us if we were able to control forex supply.
Or if you're talking about...
There's no way you can control that, because there are 2 lines. You know, forex is price. Price is a matter of demand and supply, and you keep to look for equilibrium in terms of pricing. There is none. They are moving in different directions. There are no chance of them meeting. You are getting 80% of the forex we need here, is coming through NNPC or crude. Well, we haven't seen any. For the whole year, last year till this moment, they're supposed to be sending $3 billion every month to CBN. Not even $1 has gone. Because they are doing direct swap with the crude refiners. And when they transport, refine, bring back, they say, that the cost of bringing this PMS is higher than the cost of the crude they send to them. And the difference, which is under recovery, is 4 trillion naira. Go and borrow 4 trillion naira.
Mr. Alaji, as a follow-up to Kayode's question, are we really trying, if you consider that very little of this has come up on us as a surprise, you know, the price of unofficial, the price of fuel was increased unofficially recently. You know, the diesel also went the same way, and the price of aviation fuel also went the same way. So there was some preparation, particularly for our economic managers. So shouldn't there have been a more proactive attempt in the light of these shocks of increase in price of, you know, essential commodities? Shouldn't there have been an attempt, you know, to check the inflation ahead of the announcement by the NBS?
Yeah, thank you once again. I think your question has been answered by the National Bureau of Statistics. If you have tried, the National Bureau of Statistics said we have not tried. Central Bank set a goal of 6 to 9% inflation rate, that is what our economy can accommodate. Globally, what we should be looking at is between 3 to 5%. Central Bank says 6 to 9%. As we speak, we are more than double of the upper limit at 18.6%. So have we tried? The answer will be no, not my figures, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. So, but do we know that inflation will grow to this point? I think yes. You could see what Monetary Policy Committee did in the last meeting and said, well, we are expecting inflation to go high, so we have to increase NPR on certain basis points to about 13% from 11.5, I think 150 basis points, from 11.5 to 13%. That was the decision. So, but when you ask, will Monetary Policy Committee decision curtail inflation? Because we are expecting a report again. And my opinion is that MPC should retain NPR because the real cause of inflation that we have today is now beyond money supplies, beyond having too much money in circulation. The real cause is that we are importing inflation. Russia and Ukraine are having war, not in Africa. They are somewhere in Europe, eastern part of Europe. But for every missile that goes off in Ukraine, Nigeria needs to pay more for diesel. What does it mean? Nigeria is one of the oil-producing countries. But because what is under our food, we are not using our brain to convert them to gas in our factory. That is why in January, we bought diesel for 300. This is July. We are buying for 830 per litre.
Pardon me, in essence, the CBN can do very little in taming this inflation. Is that what you're saying?
It can do parts, but not absolutely. It cannot solve all the problems. So you need Ministry of Finance, you need Ministry of Trade and Investment. When you talk of trade and investment, we are not talking of SMEs. And I think that's why that ministry is getting it wrong. When economists talk about trade, we're talking of international trade. So what is the volume of export? What is the policy that came from Ministry of Trade? I give you an instance of sugar. We say import sugar. Thousands of tonnage of sugar is what we export. Any sugar you consume, we are not mining. If you look at Sugar Development Council of Nigeria, and you go to their website, and you look at what we did in 2018, 2019, 2020, even in 2021, we were not even sure. In fact, the data was so interesting that the agency said it was not even sure of what was produced in Nigeria. And we keep importing millions of tonnage of sugar into Nigeria.
Marpo has got some question for you. Apologies. Marpo, go ahead with your question, please.
You know, oftentimes when I listen, I mean, I don't even know where to start because, I mean, oftentimes it would seem that Professor Kenny Faye is always talking about how we need to encourage production in-house. And it would seem that, you know, Mr. Paul Alaje is always bringing out the challenges also with production in-house. Given where you stand right now, I mean, given what you know about production, I mean, the challenges are there. 830 naira, 850 naira per litre of diesel is crippling many businesses, and you know a lot of them are finding it very difficult to keep on. In what areas would you say that the Ministry of Finance really needs to intervene, given the fact that it's not in control of energy? It would seem that there needs to be a potpourri of government agencies to come together, and it looks like even though they know there's very little that they're able to do, the refineries are still not, you know, producing as they ought to, if they're producing anything at all. Where precisely do you think that the federal government can intervene right now, and in what manner for the businesses to immediately fill it?
Well, there are lots I think federal government can do through the Ministry of Finance, through the Ministry of Trade and Investment. Number one, you have 4 refineries. We have tried to turn around these refineries. They have refused to shift base, if I can use that. They have remained on the same spot. Give these refineries to private sector. Even if it's 40% of the shares you want to give to private sector, or 60% as the case may be, For private sector to make profit, there must be some output. As we speak today, we are not proud of 100 litre from any of our refineries. Yet, the Accountant General, the Auditor General revealed that we are spending billions of naira to turn around these refineries and even to maintain staff that are not producing. The same with Ajaokuta, that we have a lot of people there, we put them on payroll, but we are not having any output. So if you give to private sector, I don't think anybody wants to run business, having overhead, having employees, and at the end of the month or at the end of the year, you have nothing to show for it. So government must make certain decisions. It might not be what they like, but if it will improve the overall economy of the country, I think they need to do that. Again, we need to deliberately invest on things that we promote export and also help us with import substitution. I don't think substituting import alone will be enough, but we need to do a lot to promote export. But more importantly, we need to ask ourselves, when we talk about issue of subsidy, government is spending trillions of naira of subsidy, and when you consider it this way, when we service debt with about 3-4 trillion, and we pay subsidy with about 3-4 trillion, what is government expecting to earn? 8 trillion. So 2 items on the national budget will be responsible for 80 to 100% of the entire government revenue in 2022. I'm not talking of next year, this year. And that's perhaps why IMF have said, hey, you need to slow down your borrowing. So we think that going to the market to borrow money will suddenly take us out of economic quagmire. I doubt. So the planner of Nigeria economy, we need to go back again to the drawing board and see what is wrong, then take what is right. And what do I think is right? When you look at Germany, the biggest economy in terms of population in Western Europe, is not known for German farms, it's known for German machine. America is known for production. That is the biggest in North America. If you go to the entire world or some part of Asia, you see China. Come to Africa. Nigeria is the largest. But what are we known for? Look at our GDP component. Break our GDP down. Agro takes significant proportion and service takes significant proportion. But what we liberate our people from poverty, from hunger, from deprivation is not going to be what we invest in. Agriculture is significant. I don't want to be misquoted. Agric is important. But what you put in manufacturing and processing, that is where jobs can be sustained. That is where you can protect your job. That is where your citizens can also have significant job. Because when you import, for instance, let me say I import a phone into Nigeria, which is common. Perhaps many people watching us today will import phone, but this is a decision that has been taken. One, you enjoy the phone, you give out money. When you give out money, what happens? You are depleting the foreign reserve. So central bank cannot print the dollar. But when you say you want to buy phone and you import maybe on any of the website, so central bank will now have to stand to make sure that the naira you think you are paying is converted to dollar. That is reducing. But you know the most significant one? The most significant one is that we are going to lose job. If that phone had been produced in Nigeria, the job would have stayed in Nigeria. But when the phone is produced abroad, you are telling that market producing the phone that don't worry, keep production, we will keep buying, keep getting your people to job, keep improving your GDP. Meanwhile, ours will continue to go down. So government must see economy as a picture, a broader picture, not that we just want to quickly look for quick fixes. Remember 2015? That was a very popular language. We are going to find quick fixes to quickly look at low-hanging fruit. Unfortunately, economics does not respond to quick fixes. You have to solve the problem no matter the volume you see, solve the problem so that you can bring the economy out of quagmire as we have it today.
Let me throw this to Prof. You just said the economy doesn't respond to quick fixes. I imagine that he might disagree with you. Prof, do you agree with that statement?
There are some quick fixes that will work. Now, let's take one. You remember in 2017, Central Bank delisted 43 items. And the minister then, of finance then, didn't take my advice to bump up the use the levy instrument to bump up the tax, because we are under common external tariff in ECOWAS. We can't touch those. But we can bump up by using, so to send a message to those key items that we just don't want or want to discourage, no, it's not going to be business as usual. Now, if you look at the trade balance between Nigeria and China, it's over 2 trillion. Buying what? That's not the raw material that our industries need. So we can restrain bumping up duty on the ones that feed our industry. But those frivolous items, we could deal with those. Two, now come to gas expansion plan. Gas is Nigerian asset, not crude. We have over 220 trillion cubic feet of gas. We have a gas expansion plan, which is what we are responding on energy carbon decarbonization. That is our program. Why don't we put a little money to get all the trucks, all the buses, all the major transport systems to change to gas? Just a small retooling of they choose to gas. That will bring down diesel. The demand for diesel will collapse. And then, of course, some fuel. And there are so many generators that can use gas. A lot of them are using gas. Shift to gas. And it will reduce that consumption of both petrol and diesel. Okay. Just a temporary fix.
I don't know if it's going to be as straightforward as that, but we need to go to break. But I think I remember that during President Obasanjo's time, the then Minister of Finance, after they delisted some of those items, said, we made a mistake. They relisted some of them afterwards. But we'll come back and talk about solutions. For the person listening out there, what should we be doing? And how do we even identify who can solve our problems? Because it's an election year. We'll talk about those when we come back. Don't go away.